If you only watch one video about Israel, Palestine, and the Jews, it should be this. The Iron Dome is the world's greatest missile defense system. It keeps destruction, violence, and hate, paid for by the international community, thanks for that, out of Israel, keeping the people inside of it safe. The dissemination of anti-Jew ideas functions very much the same way. We are under a relentless barrage of anti-Jew, anti-Israel messaging all day, every day, from all around us. But unlike Hamas rockets, this weaponry is invisible, and we don't get an alert on our phones to warn us when it's coming. Even one of these mental missiles getting through can cause extreme damage. In order to stop them, we need to break their cloaking abilities, build up your own internal warning system, and safeguard your mind where truth and clarity reside. Today, I'm here to help you build your own mental Iron Dome, to provide you with the 3 essential, unassailable, missile-proof ideas that comprise the foundation upon which your impenetrable fortress of moral clarity is to be built. As Western liberal societies, we naively, arrogantly, ignorantly, continue to believe that the entire world, even the universe, operates on our same fixed set of moral values, that everyone plays by the same rules we do. Well, guess what, hotshot? They don't. That's not reality. We have enemies. As Westerners, as Americans, as Jews, as people who value free and equal societies. And our enemies, Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran, supported by proxy militias and other opportunistic states like Turkey and Qatar, are united in destabilizing Western power, liberal norms, and Israeli sovereignty. This is not a conspiracy theory. Qatar invests billions of dollars in American education. Russia interferes in our presidential elections. China uses TikTok to sow discord. This is common knowledge. Like it or not, we are living in an age of mass manipulation. Our institutions, media, education, and culture are being subverted through the deliberate use of emotional triggers, identity framing, narrative control, and incentive structures to steer our perceptions and actions while preserving the illusion of independent judgment. We are living in the Matrix. Our minds hooked into an illusory world we think we have freely chosen, but is in fact the creation of our enemies, who, in reality, are harvesting our bodies for energy. Okay, not that last part, but you get the idea. To protect ourselves from mass manipulation, we need to recognize and deconstruct it. And for that, we turn to former KGB propaganda specialist Yuri Bezmenov. I could do a whole video on Bezmenov's 4 stages of mass manipulation, but for our purposes, I'm going to focus on just the first one, demoralization, whereby a society's ability to recognize truth, defend itself, or believe in its own institutions is eroded by nefarious actors. And the hidden engine of demoralization is repetition. Simply put, what is repeated becomes familiar, what is familiar becomes credible, and what becomes credible no longer needs to be defended. Repetition doesn't require proof, only presence and the slow wearing down of any potential resistance. Repetition works as a result of what cognitive psychologists call the illusory truth effect. Repeated statements feel more true, even if they are known to be false. This is one of the strongest, most replicated findings in behavioral science. It works on experts. It works on people who have been lied to before. It works without argument. Repetition also leads to narrative entrenchment. Once a narrative has been embraced, to challenge it feels disruptive, annoying, or easily dismissed as partisan. This is why propaganda thrives on slogans, binaries, memes, buzzwords. The aim is not nuance or depth or truth, just stuff that's easy to repeat. And finally, repetition leads to pluralistic ignorance. When an idea appears ubiquitous, we assume everyone else believes it, so silence is interpreted as agreement, and public dissent feels risky and lonely. So even if many people privately know something isn't true, they don't speak up about it because they think they're alone, and the pervasiveness of the lie feels inevitable. We're going to get into the specifics of repetition as it pertains to the Israeli-Palestine conflict a little later, but now that we've named what we're up against, we're ready to start building our mental Iron Dome. The first pillar we have to lock in is the understanding, without a shred of doubt, that if the Arabs wanted a Palestinian state more than they wanted to destroy the Jewish one, there would be a Palestinian state. Period. This simple notion is what the entire Israeli-Arab conflict is about. And not because I said so, but because the Palestinians have said so, literally and openly for decades, supported by every action they have taken for the past 100 years. Again, I could make an entire video just about this history, but I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. So let's just look at the very first partition plan the Arabs were offered in 1936 under the Peel Commission, Britain's initial attempt to deal with the mandate they had over the territory known as Palestine. The British plan offered Jews, who were already in the land through both continuous presence and legal land purchase, about 18% of the territory, with all of the rest going to the Arabs, minus a British-controlled corridor through Jerusalem and Bethlehem. Of course, the Jews said yes, and the Arabs said no. No Jewish sovereignty, no Jewish immigration, and they in fact violently revolted against the British for the next several years, leading the Brits to close down immigration with catastrophic results for European Jews attempting to flee the Holocaust. Moreover, nearly every time peace has seemingly been on the table, the Palestinian response has been to initiate violence against the Jews. The War of Independence, the Second Intifada, the disengagement from Gaza, etc. Ask yourself, are these the actions of people who just want a state if only they'd be granted one, or the actions of people who want to eradicate Jews first, state later? Israel was created the same way nearly every other country on earth was created, by a nationalist, religious, or ethnic group, in the Jews' case both, building the foundations of statehood in the geographic location they're connected to, and then having their new state recognized by other nations around the world. Somaliland, which has been much in the news lately, has done the former but lacks the latter, which is why it's not a state. This is how the world works. Israel is a country, not an experiment, not an ideology, not a project. A country, like all the others, and it is not getting reversed any more than any other country on earth is. The existence of Israel is not the reason there's no Palestinian state. Lack of financial or public support is not the reason there's no Palestinian state. The occupation in the area known as the West Bank is not the reason there's no Palestinian state. Bibi Netanyahu is not the reason there's no Palestinian state. And the only reason you consider any of these as legitimate explanations is because you've been distracted into doing so by mass manipulation. You have been conned into embracing repetition as reasoning. We can debate these things until we're blue in the face, but in terms of solving the actual conflict, engaging with anything but the core idea is like shuffling chairs on the deck of the Titanic. And the iceberg, to use the term coined by next week's Being Jewish guest, Dr. Einat Wilf, is Palestinianism. And until Palestinian society is either convinced or strong-armed into accepting the presence of Jews in some part of the land to which we are indigenous, there will be no two states. Ideas like from the river to the sea, or one state for two people, or right of return, support for UNRWA, the generational inheritance of refugee status, communities in Gaza itself being called refugee camps, the narrative of the Nakba, these are the lifelines of Palestinianism, and our focus has to be on destroying these ideas, not just for the safety and security of the Jewish people, but for the Palestinians as well, who will never live in a state of their own as long as the Western world keeps their leaders doped up on billions in welfare and long-held dreams of Jewish extinction on life support. Also, and this is an unconscious behavior I see a lot from folks on the left, you do not need to say you hate Israel's government or Bibi Netanyahu in order to buy yourself the ability to say you support Israel. Hate Bibi if you want to, I don't care. But I bet a lot of you haven't even critically examined if your feelings are the result of well-researched and hard-won conclusions or because you've simply submitted to repetition. Let me remind you, it has never mattered what Israeli government is in power, right, left, center. The Palestinians said no to all of them. There are, of course, a few very brave, moderate Palestinians speaking with great clarity on this subject, like Ahmed Fouad al-Khatib, John Aziz, or Mossab Hassan Youssef. But what do they all have in common? They live in the West, where they can safely espouse these ideas that are in no way embraced or considered by actual Palestinian leadership. And any supposed moderation on the part of the Palestinian Authority is pragmatic rather than principled. Real, where regime survival and international legitimacy are at stake, but undermined by internal incentives that reward violence and discourage genuine reconciliation. So there we have it. Mental Iron Dome pillar number 1. When the Palestinians, as a collective and through their leadership, decide they want a state more than they want Jews to not have one, the conflict will end. Everything else is noise. Welcome to part 2 of my 3-part series, The Only 3 Things You Need to Know About Israel, Palestine, and the Jews. This week, we're moving on to our second pillar, a clear understanding of the contemporary anti-Jew hate movement known as Anti-Zionism. The lie you've been sold is that Anti-Zionism is a rational, intellectual position worthy of consideration, or at least tolerance. That it is rooted in just and fair opinion and legitimate historical, political, or ideological grievance. And while that all sounds reasonable on paper, all you need to do is walk through a pro-Palestine protest or spend 3 seconds on social media to see that in practice, anti-Zionism is as much about being against Zionism as anti-Semitism is about being against Semitism, which is to say, not at all. It's smoke and mirrors, kid. Operationally, anti-Zionism has nothing to do with intellectual discourse. It is about hateful actions taken to bar Jews from polite society, socially, professionally, culturally, and often physically. Blocking Jewish college students from class, defacing synagogues and Jewish cemeteries, boycotting Jewish authors, artists, athletes, musicians. These are the day-to-day activities of the anti-Zionist, none of which has anything remotely to do with debating the merits of a Jewish state, obviously. So how are people who define themselves as progressive and morally good able to justify such blatantly horrendous and bigoted behavior? Through the creation of a supervillain known as the Zionist, an imagined creature so uniquely evil and demonic it ceases to be human and is therefore deserving of all the righteous hate and even violence brought down upon it. The creation of this nefarious Zionist is where repetition comes in, for it is constructed through the ceaseless echoing of several key libels, each itself an inversion of something actually being done to Jews, not by them, and which represent the ultimate antithesis of what today's cult of progressivism most reveres: human rights and social justice. This framework is how Jew hatred has always worked. You take whatever creed is most exalted by the people of the age, be it Christianity or science or human rights, and employ distortions, misrepresentations, and outright lies to paint Jews as the perfect enemy of everything that creed holds most dear. By this token, the persecution of Jews, far from being unjust, is in fact a noble undertaking of ethical concern, safeguarding what is good while extinguishing what is bad. In medieval times, when Christianity was venerated, the original blood libel painted Jews as murderous Christian killers who drank the blood of children for twisted demonic rituals. In the 30s, the Nazis relied on pseudo-scientific proof that it was the very blood of Jews that was literally polluting the superior German race, preventing precious national unity. And today, we have anti-Zionism, built upon a number of core libels that portray the Zionist as everything we despise in our anti-racist, anti-imperialist, pro-social justice world. You know the greatest hits: apartheid, colonizer, baby killer, ethnostate, genocide. I often refer to these buzzwords as flaming bags of dog poop, because it takes zero effort to toss them on your doorstep and run away, leaving you to stamp out the fire and end up covered in shit. Not only is each patently untrue of Jews, but consistent with the historical pattern, each is actually true of the accuser. In the West, you have deep-seated white guilt born of the imperialist past, racial subjugation, and the slaughter of indigenous peoples. In the Middle East, you have the Arabs, one of the world's great imperialist forces, whose own states subjugated their Jewish minorities for centuries, and the most radical of whom, on October 7th, committed as much genocide as they could muster, killing every baby they encountered. My original plan was to take you through each of these libels and debunk them for you, but when I wrote it out, it was way too long, so I'm saving that for 2 monologues from now, once our mental Iron Dome is locked and loaded. If you can't wait and you want to start digging in on the libels now, I recommend checking out the work of Adam Lewis Klein, founder of the movement against anti-Zionism, whose website is the definitive resource on this topic. For now, suffice it to say, they're all bullshit. And the only reason you maybe ever question if any of these libels might be true is, say it with me now, repetition. Believe me, I get it. I have been there too. When you hear something enough times from enough people, as we've established, our brains are wired to wonder if it just might not be true. But just because you hear the lie a million times doesn't make it not a lie. And the only reason you're even hearing it so many times is because that is the official strategy. Here's a small example. In the first 9 months after October 7th, the New York Times published 6,656 articles about the war in Gaza. Compare that to only 80 articles in 9 months during America's war against ISIS in Iraq, or about 5,400 articles about Syria's civil war over 13 years. The Associated Press, one of the world's largest wire services, meaning they basically determine the news that other outlets then cover, they employ more staff to cover Israel than they do Russia, China, and India combined. That's more staff to cover a tiny country of 10 million people than 3 enormous countries of 3 billion people. Another key facet of anti-Zionism is legitimacy. Like every flavor of mainstream Jew hate before it, anti-Zionism has the seal of approval of the intelligentsia. College professors, Hollywood stars, UN officials, Amnesty International. All of these infected spaces create a closed feedback loop, each conferring legitimacy on the other, all while operating from the same basic libels instead of racist behaviors. And thus, to borrow an elegant phrase from Vanderbilt University Jewish Studies professor Shaul Kellner, is how we end up with an intellectually justified, socially acceptable othering of Jews whose social base is in the professional class. So back to our pillar. You must be crystal clear about what anti-Zionism is and how it works. You don't need to be an expert in Israeli history or politics or current events to fight this hatred. And remember, anti-Zionism isn't based on facts anyway. The anti-Zionist meets facts with dismissal, discrediting, disbelief, or most commonly, disinterest. I have experienced this up close and personally myself. Your facts, your experience, your argument may be unassailable, yet you can see those facts bounce right off them without making so much as a dent. Their narrative has already been decided upon, and nothing you can say will change it. But all is not lost, my friends, because you know what you can become an expert in? Discerning the machinery of Jew hatred, both broadly and with anti-Zionism specifically. To again quote Kellner, if anti-Zionism is the othering of Jews from the left, anti-Semitism is the othering of Jews from the right. That's it. That's what they are, folks. No more, no less. Both forms of hate function similarly, but exhibit totally different features that must be understood. Anti-Semitism is low class. Anti-Zionism is high class. One says Jews aren't white. One says Jews are super white. One says get out of Europe. One says go back to Europe. One says the Nazis were right. The other says Jews are the Nazis. You get the idea. In the post-Holocaust era, we've been educated, not at all, or at best, to only recognize Jew hate from the right. Almost nobody knows how to detect it from the left, including Jews, which is why so many have marched straight into the anti-Zionist spotlight, blissfully ignorant of their own tokenization by an anti-Jew hate movement they lack the awareness to perceive. And all of this despite the fact that the Soviets systematically repressed their Jewish population through anti-Zionism quite successfully less than a century ago. But nobody teaches it, so nobody knows about it. Well, now, except for you. So from this day forward, you need to commit to training yourself to recognize anti-Zionist hate. You need to be like Keanu Reeves at the end of The Matrix. Yes, again, when he's finally able to see past the illusory digital world to the literal code beneath of which it's comprised. That's got to be you, seeing through the facade of anti-Zionism to identify the architecture of anti-Jew racist hate beneath it. Libels are anti-Zionist racist hate. Slurs like Israel or Zio or Zio-Nazi are racist hate. Undercutting any positive word about Jews or Israel as being paid for or propaganda is racist hate. Defacing something Jewish with the words Free Palestine, whether it be outwardly Israeli, like a restaurant, outwardly Jewish, like a day school, or even something that just belongs to a Jewish person, like a car or a random social media post, is racist hate. Litmus tests that require denouncing Israel, Jewish personhood, or acceptance of anti-Jew libels is racist hate. Talking over Jews and explaining to them who we are, what Zionism is, who Zionists are, that is racist hate. Chanting for Israelis to be ethnically cleansed, for jihadist violence against Jews everywhere, or for the literal killing of Jewish men and women is racist hate. Refusing service, whether it's in an Uber, a restaurant, a classroom, or a therapist's office, just because the person is Israeli or Jewish, is racist hate. Covering your face with a mask so you can roam the streets with a mob to harass Jews at synagogues, hospitals, or college campuses is racist hate. And of course, spitting on, chasing, assaulting, or murdering Jews or Israelis simply for being Jews or Israelis is racist hate. Moral clarity can only exist when the door to doubt has been slammed shut. Not out of arrogance or obstinance or ignorance, but out of absolute certitude. You know the world is round, that door is closed. Anti-Zionism is a racist, anti-Jew hate movement. Set it, forget it, and slam that door closed. Welcome to part 3 of my 3-part series, The Only 3 Things You Need to Know About Israel, Palestine, and the Jews. There's a cartoon I saw online once that I often think back to ground me as I undertake the work of Jewish advocacy in a world that can be less than kind to Jews. It's an image of one guy standing in front of a sea of thousands of people staring him down, and the guy says, "Yes, I'm saying that all of you are wrong." This is what moral clarity feels like in 2026. At times, you will be placed at odds with the majority. You will be told you are brainwashed when in fact you have resisted the brainwashing. To be right in this work is to stand against a tide of people who are convinced you are wrong. Which brings me to the third and final pillar of our mental Iron Dome, a concept that I'm coining the Jeremiah effect. That's right, Yeladim, crack open those Bibles because Hebrew school is in session. We're going to flip to the book of Jeremiah, which can be found in the section of the Tanakh, or Hebrew Bible, called Nevi'im, or prophets. Jeremiah lived during the final decades of the kingdom of Judah, aka biblical Israel, and he was present for one of the most catastrophic moments in Jewish history, the destruction of Jerusalem and the first temple by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. Jeremiah's defining trait was his moral clarity in isolation. He warned Judah that its corruption would lead to destruction, while all the other leaders assured a future of peace and security. As a reward for his stance, Jeremiah was ridiculed, beaten, imprisoned, and ostracized by his own community. Yet he refused to deny what he knew to be true, without expectation of success or popularity. And he remained steadfast in his compassion for his people, grieving their impending doom even as he warned them of it. We spoke last week about inversion. How all of the libels Jews are accused of are actually heinous acts being committed against Jews by those who seek to destroy us. One of the oldest inversions is that the Jews are a secret cabal of conspirators plotting to control our minds and take over the world, when, in reality, it is our enemies who conspire, who work together to concoct and skillfully disseminate a malicious and demonizing narrative meant to turn the world against us. Just think about it objectively for a second. Which sounds more plausible? That 15 million Jews needed to be propagandized by day school teachers and the Israeli government into a false understanding of our own history, values, and lived experience in order to trick us into supporting Jewish sovereignty in the world's only Jewish state where the majority of us live and or are otherwise in some way personally connected to? Or that Israel's 2.2 billion enemies used propaganda on billions of other unsuspecting non-Jews around the world in their openly stated mission to destroy the little Jewish country that could. This inversion of reality, where the truth seems isolating and consensus seems false, is not accidental. It is the cost of refusing a lie that hypnotizes the many. This is what it feels like, and we must prepare ourselves mentally to be faced with that feeling and not thrown by it. Now, you may wonder, as I have, how can this happen? How can so many be so wrong on something so easy to get right? Well, I want to try to help answer that in a couple of ways. First, as we covered last week, is the closed-loop anti-Zionist ecosystem. On the one hand, you've got social media and academics, both of which have been heavily and strategically pumped full of foreign money from the likes of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Iran. Why? Because those are the two arenas where our young people spend all of their time, at school and online. No wonder Gen Z is the most anti-Jewish generation we've seen in nearly a century. On the other hand, you've got institutions, like the UN or legacy media outlets or human rights organizations, to which we mistakenly ascribe an aura of moral perfection and unimpeachability. In this, we fall prey to a number of cognitive biases: authority bias, institutional trust bias, status quo bias. Because these institutions possess the mantle of authority, because we assume good faith from established systems, and because we assume if they've been around a while, it means they must be working well, we treat such institutions uncritically, like heavenly bodies incapable of wrongdoing. But in fact, institutions are, of course, just groups of people. Nothing more, nothing less. And as we know, people are flawed, inherently unequal in moral character and aptitude, all susceptible to bias and mental weakness, and all of whom have their own agendas. To dismiss this intrinsic reality of institutions is to be either naive or blissfully cocooned in the privilege of a life as yet untouched by the wicked machinations of these organizations. How nice for you. All of these entities share, cite, and yes-and each other off the same lies and distortions, pinging the desired anti-Jew narrative back and forth, helping it bloom unfettered within a massive, faux progressive echo chamber of their own design. But wait, you may be saying, 18-year-old dodos who use TikTok like Google are one thing, but what about my friends, my family, my teachers, my colleagues? I know they studied Nazi Germany in school. I know they learned how dangerous and effective propaganda can be. So how is it possible for them to still fall prey to it? Or on the flip side, they may say, well, look at all these intelligent people who say Israel bad, Palestine good. How could they possibly all be wrong? And my answer to both of these groups is the same, and it's actually a question. What do you think Nazi Germany looked like? What do you think it means when we say that all of the politicians and intelligentsia and academics and journalists all sang the same anti-Jewish tune? This. It looked like this. And there's the rub. Because of the way our brains work, we are essentially only able to study history as spectators, never from the view as participants in its next chapter. Why? Drumroll please. More cognitive biases. Honestly, that could also be the name of this show. I find these absolutely fascinating. The first is historical exceptionalism. We arrogantly assume that our moment is fundamentally different from the past, even when structural conditions are basically the same and the warning signs identical. We believe humans of the past were constrained by ignorance, primitive norms, or yes, even duped by propaganda. But not us. We are enlightened, informed, and morally superior, totally removed from those other people who, by the way, were basically just like our grandparents. As a result, we treat history as interesting, but not diagnostic. There's moral self-licensing. Because I learned the history, I would never repeat it. Or the they were monsters fallacy. If I were there, I would have acted differently. Bullshit. History clearly teaches us, again and again, that our most catastrophic failures were carried out by ordinary people, not uniquely evil monsters from another world, and that these ordinary people were acting within societal norms, not outside them. The last cognitive bias I'll touch on, because this is getting a bit long and things always feel better in threes, is temporal distance bias. Cognitive psychology teaches us that events far away in time are processed abstractly, while events close to us are processed concretely. Thus, we analyze history at a remove, with a clear sense of causality and morality, while we experience the present emotionally and situationally. Our pesky brains resist collapsing those two modes into one, so the exact same pattern may be understood entirely differently simply depending on when it occurs. So, as you cling to your sense of what's right and true, you will be told you are biased, emotional, reactionary, blinded by your identity, or paid by AIPAC. You are not, unless, you work at AIPAC. The confusion, the isolation, the sense that reality has inverted, these are not signs of error. They are symptoms of rectitude. The Jeremiah effect names this experience. Understand it. Expect it. Be ready for it, or it will shake you. And that is why embracing it is the final pillar of our impenetrable mental fortification. Palestinianism, anti-Zionism, the Jeremiah effect. Full comprehension and command of these three concepts will safeguard your moral clarity in an impregnable fortress that not even Dave Smith can get into, and that douche muppet is everywhere for some reason. And now, armed with your very own mental Iron Dome, the greatest Jew hate defense system in the world, I need you to get out there and reclaim the truth from those who seek to deny it. You're not required to convince everyone. You're not required to win the internet. In fact, you don't need to win the argument at all. You just need to make sure you've got the armor to withstand the fight day after day. Ignorance, laziness, and hate are their weapons. Clarity is ours. And when you need a reminder, recall the cartoon I mentioned at the beginning. Truth doesn't need a crowd. It needs people willing to stand still when the crowd moves. And when you feel alone, remember, you're not lost. You're early. All of history's great movements had to start somewhere. And now that we've got you ready to be a part of this one, the only question is, will you? This concludes my three-part series, The Only Three Things You Need to Know About Israel, Palestine, and the Jews. If you like this video, please be sure to comment, like, subscribe, and share it with anyone else you think might like it too. And if you haven't already, look up Being Jewish with Jonah Platt on your favorite podcast platform. Subscribe there too for more in-depth analysis and unfiltered conversations with amazing guests you won't find anywhere else. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.